Welcome to Virtual Veg Out, a partnership between Jessamine County Public Library and the University of Kentucky's College of Food, Agriculture, and Environment's Cooperative Extension Service. In this episode, we're going to explore one of my favorite foods, tacos. The story of tacos begins with the story of the tortilla, which has been around for more than 2,500 years. There is evidence for the people in Mesoamerica making tortillas before 500 BC. Aztecs and other Nahuatl speakers made flatbread with a ground maize and called it tlaxcali. When the Spanish came to Central America, they called this flatbread tortilla, meaning little cake. Methods of making corn tortillas have changed very little in a couple thousand years. Corn kernels are soaked in a solution of lime or ash and water to remove their outer skins in a process called nixtamalization. Nixtamalized maize has several benefits over unprocessed grain. It's easier to grind, has more nutritional value, including increased iron, tastes better, and has reduced mycotoxins. In other words, less mold. Here's a short video on how to make corn tortillas at home. To make traditional corn tortillas, you'll need masa harina, which is really Spanish for dough flour, and it's made from dried corn kernels that have been cooked and soaked in lime water and then ground into this flour. So don't be confused, you can't use cornmeal, it's not the same thing. About a cup of masa harina and about a half a cup of water, and you just mix it together into a dough. If it seems too dry, you just drizzle a little more water in. Once you've got a soft but workable dough that gathers together into a ball, then you can let it sit for about 15 minutes. Once your dough is rested, divide it into equal parts. How big those parts are depends on how big you want to make your tortillas. Roll your parts into nice round balls, and then take your hands and form each ball into a sort of circular flat pancake shape. Now this is the point, if you have a tortilla press, you'll want to get it out and use it, but I don't have a tortilla press. So I have placed a piece of plastic wrap on my counter. I'm going to fold the plastic wrap over the top of my disc and roll my little pancake into a tortilla. Preheat an iron skillet. You don't need any kind of fat or grease on the pan. And flop your corn tortilla into your skillet and cook it for about a minute on each side. You'll notice that the edges of this tortilla have started to curl up, and that means that it's time to flip it over. Your finished corn tortillas are best eaten hot, but if you have to reheat them, steaming them or microwaving them works pretty well. Flour tortillas originated in northern Mexican states, where the territory is more suited to growing wheat. Flour tortillas are made with the same basic process. Grind the grain to make a flour, make a dough, roll it out, and cook it on a flat surface over heat. But the grain is not nixtamalized before it's made into flour, of course. If you've got flour, water, and salt, you've got flour tortillas at home. Here's how to make up a quick batch whenever you need them. So one of the keys to making great tacos is to make your own tortillas. There's nothing like a fresh tortilla. First, we're going to make some flour tortillas. They're really simple. This is a cup of flour, about a half a teaspoon of salt. We're going to put in about a half a tablespoon of vegetable shortening. Then take our fingers and work this in. When you feel it's fairly evenly distributed and your flour starts to look a little bit like coarse crumbs, then you take about a quarter cup of water and pour in and continue working that until it becomes a soft dough. If you're having trouble getting it to stick together, you can add a little more water. Alright, so once you've got it kneaded into a nice, soft, easy to work ball, then we're just going to lay a cloth over the top and let it sit for about 15 minutes. Once your dough is rested, divide it into several small pieces and roll them into balls, and then flatten them into little discs. once you have your tortillas rolled out into nice, flat, smooth sheets, then you're going to heat an iron skillet or a griddle to medium heat and lay it inside. You don't need to grease the griddle. It should just be dry. And you're going to leave it on one side for maybe a minute, minute and a half. You want to have a plate with some tin foil on it ready to go so that as you finish cooking your tortillas, you can wrap them right inside the tin foil and they can stay good and hot so they're ready when you want to eat them. Tacos are probably almost as old as the tortilla. After all, a taco is really just a tortilla wrapped around other food. The word taco is from the Nahuatl word tlaco, which means half or in the middle, referring to the way it's formed. Jeffrey M. Pilcher, professor of history at the University of Minnesota and author of several works on the history of Mexican food, notes that Mexican miners used the word taco to refer to the little charges they would use to excavate ore. These charges were little pieces of paper that they wrapped around gunpowder and inserted into the holes in the rock. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, Mexican migrant workers began coming to the United States to work in the mines and on the railroads. The word taco being used to refer to a particular dish or food appears around that same time, specifically to tacos de mirno, miners' tacos. Tacos were a working-class staple sold as a street food from carts or booths or in small taquerias. In San Antonio, Texas, tacos were associated with women known as the chili queens, who sold tamales, chili, and tacos in the streets. Tourists came to sample the spicy, exciting food. By the 1920s, many of the children of those Mexican migrant workers had become citizens of the United States. Tacos and other traditional Mexican foods were adapted to the ingredients that were available here. Things like hamburger, iceberg lettuce, and cheddar cheese started to appear on tacos. Still, tacos remained a Mexican food sold in Mexican neighborhoods. Much of America didn't experience the taco or other Mexican food until Glenn Bell created the Taco Bell franchise in 1962. Although he most certainly did not create the taco or the first hard-shell taco, as he once claimed, he did help to introduce mainstream American culture to a version, albeit a processed, less flavorful one, of Mexican food. No one knows exactly how long the practice of frying corn tortillas in a handy U-shape has been around. A cookbook from 1868 has an illustration and description of a taco shell, but likely people have been making them almost as long as they've been making tortillas. No matter when they came into being, hard-shell tacos helped ease the taco into America's restaurants. They stayed fresh longer, and they were easy to grab and eat on the go. Today, good tacos with hard shells or soft shells can be found throughout the U.S., with ingredients as diverse as the country itself. Of course, the recipe we're going to share with you now is vegetable-based, because this is Veg Out. This recipe calls for fresh flour or corn tortillas, homemade salsa, a simple cabbage slaw, pickled jalapenos, guacamole, crispy chili tofu, and refried beans. High in fiber, folate, protein, manganese, selenium, and vitamins C, K, and A, these nutrient-packed treats are the perfect summertime dinner. We've already talked about how to make tortillas. Now we'll go over how to make each one of the fillings, starting with salsa. There are hundreds of different versions of salsa, and no taco is complete without a good salsa, in my opinion. So I'm going to show you the very standard salsa that I make and keep in my refrigerator all the time. I admit that my salsa varies probably every time I make it, so this is just an estimation, and keep in mind that you can adjust it to your own tastes. So the first thing I do is take about 4 cloves of garlic and about a half of a red onion and a very small handful of the controversial cilantro. I know there are people in the world that really hate cilantro, so maybe you'll leave it out. I like cilantro, so we're going to put it in there, and we're just going to chop this fine in a food processor. Next, chop up about a half of a red bell pepper and a half of a poblano pepper, along with a couple of really fresh, ripe tomatoes straight out of the garden. Those winter Kroger tomatoes will not do the trick. And we're going to add a can of fire-roasted crushed tomatoes. Now you can also fire roast some tomatoes in the oven and crush them yourself. Works just fine, but I kind of like the contrast of flavors between the canned tomatoes and the fresh tomatoes, and it gives it a nice base. So we're going to add that, and we're going to add all of our chopped vegetables, and then we're going to add some lime juice. Squeeze about half of a lime in there. We're going to add salt, and it's probably going to take about half a tablespoon. Then I also add a little bit of ancho and chipotle chili powder, maybe just a half a teaspoon each, and stir it up. And there you have your finished beautiful salsa. It'll keep for a week or two, but it won't last that long. Another important aspect of a good taco is crunch. Now, a lot of people just use shredded lettuce to give their taco that fresh, crunchy flavor, but I like to make a slaw. So what I've done here is take about a half a cup of red onion chopped fine, about a half a cup of red pepper chopped fine, and some purple cabbage shredded. It's maybe about a cup of that. And we're gonna put a little honey on here. If you want it to be vegan, then you can use agave nectar. We're going to put some salt, the juice of about half a lime, and we're going to put some apple cider vinegar and stir that up. To make a creamy, delicious guacamole, you'll just need a couple avocados, about 2 cloves of garlic, a teaspoon or so of salt, lime juice, and then I take about 1/3 of a cup of yogurt. This can be nut-based yogurt or dairy. And smooth everything together in a food processor. First, cut up about 10 jalapenos. Make sure you're wearing plastic gloves. Jalapenos aren't that hot, but if you wear contacts, you'll know later why gloves are a good idea. The smaller jalapenos have more heat, so you might want to include some large and some small. And you may want to include some sweet pepper to add color and mildness. Now in a pot over the stove, combine a cup of filtered water, a cup of apple cider vinegar, about a tablespoon of salt. You can add a couple cloves of garlic, or you can just add about a teaspoon of garlic powder. And I like to add about a teaspoon of celery seed and about a half a teaspoon of mustard powder. And we're going to add a half a cup of sugar and get it boiling. You want to let your brine simmer for about 5 minutes before you pour it over the jalapenos in the jar. While you're waiting for your mixture to boil, disperse your jalapenos evenly into a few jars. Then carefully pour your brine over the top of your jalapenos. Now you can let them set there uncovered for an hour or so, and then store them in the fridge up to 2 weeks. For our taco protein, we're going to make a crispy tofu. And we're going to do this by taking some oats, a chili powder spice blend, for which the recipe is included right after this segment. It's got ancho chili and chipotle chili, oregano and garlic powder and cayenne and a whole bunch of stuff in it. So you'll get that recipe here in a second. We're putting about maybe 2 tablespoons in with the oatmeal. And then we're just going to pulse this a couple times in the food processor. You want the oats to be broken down, but not a fine powder. Then we're going to pour this in a bowl. And we're going to take some tofu that we've coated very lightly in olive oil. And we're going to roll the pieces in our oat and spice mix. And then we'll just set these out on a cookie sheet and we'll put them into an oven at about 400 degrees until they're crispy. Make sure your pieces are evenly spread over your tray so that they can brown on all sides. You might have to flip them once while they're in the oven. Refried beans are a really easy dish to make. First, brown some onions and a little bit of olive oil in a skillet. Once your onions are cooked, starting to get a little brown, then you're going to add beans. Now I like to use black beans, but you can use pinto beans or whatever you like. I also like to use beans that I have cooked down personally in vegetable broth. That way it gives them more flavor. If you use canned beans, you're probably going to need to add some salt, some pepper, some other spices, just to give them extra flavor. Now we'll cook the beans and onions till the beans get softer. Mine still have a little bit of texture. This might take about 10 minutes. Once your beans are cooked down and soft, take either a potato masher or a metal spatula and smash them until they're the consistency of refried beans. Now, I like to leave some texture to mine. Some of the original beans, I don't like them completely mashed. I think it makes them taste better. And then, once you've got them to the texture that you like, taste them, see if they need any salt or pepper. And you've got wonderful refried beans. Now put all those great ingredients together and make yourself a taco. Thanks for watching. Check out the JCPL YouTube channel for more great videos.